Welcome to the Audio History Library and Museum. The mission of the library is to document our industry so its history does not disappear. To that end, we have files on well over 2,000 audio equipment manufacturers from 38 countries. Earliest document, 1860, an engraving of the first machine to record sound. It was developed by technical editor and typographer Edward Leon Scott de Martinville, who is trying to record voices for posterity. Before 1860, no human had ever seen sound. Doing so was an astonishing scientific discovery. 17 years later, however, in 1877, Thomas Edison's genius provided the ability to hear the cylinders that he recorded, and hence the name of this exhibit, Playback. In another decade, in 1887, metallurgist Emil Berliner unspooled the cylinder's groove, putting the spiral on a flat record, making it much easier to replicate, sound better, and its ease of handling elicited an exponential rise in popularity. The AHL Museum is pleased to present this arc of human technical achievement over the past 160 years of retrieving sound from a groove. From thorn and pig bristle to diamond and laser, wax and shellac to acetate lacquer, copper, silver, nickel and chromium, and vinyl. Magic to disc mastering. In the beginning, the transducer that translated the mechanical movements of the needle in the groove into a signal amplified acoustically by the gramophone's horn is called a sound box. Most sound boxes look more or less like this example. The steel needle is inserted at the bottom and secured by tightening the knurled screw head. This one from 1920, by New York manufacturer Crippen, celebrates the magic of the new technology of radio, as does this padlock. 1926 saw the introduction of electrical recording and playback. Replacing the acoustic sound box is the first electrical cartridge by Western Electric, the Model 2A. The first cartridge by RCA, the 4606 Photophone, followed in 1927. In 1928, Western Electric came out with the 4A, and this 9A is from the 1930s. From 1877, the spiral groove of a record was acid-etched in zinc. Then, over 2 decades later, was cut into the mere flat surface of a thick round blank made of beeswax. The cylinders used vertical modulation, the up and down of hill and dale. The flat record used that, or a side-to-side lateral movement. Either way, it was a monophonic signal. The speed was approximately 78 revolutions per minute, but spanning the upper 50s to 120 RPM, and the records were made of brittle shellac. This brings us to the subject of cutter heads, the part of the disc cutting lathe that actually inscribes that spiral groove onto the surface of the master. One of the most historic cutter heads is this Grampian, serial number 376, which cut the first mono Blue Note records by jazz recording specialist Rudy Van Gelder. This cherry red model is by Decca, both from England, and a Fairchild Model 642 cutter head from Long Island. Working for EMI in the London suburb of Hayes, Alan Dower Blumlein filed patents in December 1931 for binaural, or stereo recording and reproduction. The world would not see his work for years. Bell Labs, too, experimented with stereo in 1936 in the building bordered by Bethune, Washington, West, and Bank Streets in New York City's West Village. In the modern era, we have a selection of cartridges. In 1948, this ESL housed an Ordophon Type A. In 1962, both from Germany, the EMT TSD-15 was the standard in radio stations across the continent, and this Neumann DST-62 was probably installed in Neumann cutting lathes. From the land of Lincoln, a 1966 Shure V15 Type 2. From Japan, a 1970 Gold VW microbus that drove around the record playing it. You gotta have fun. From England, in 1974, the London by Decca. Back to Japan, a mid-1970s Grace F8T, a 1982 Dynavector Carat 23R. The last of Shure's V15 series, the Type 5, also from 1982. From Germany, the 1983 Benz Micro, and 2011 Clear Audio 24-karat Goldfinger statement. From Japan, the 2012 Lyra Atlas and 2018 Hanawa HCTR CO moving coil. Holding the cartridge in place as it plays the record, and integral to the playback system, are tone arms. At the advent of stereo, Emery Cook's left and right mono tracks were played by this rare 1952 Cook binaural double arm. The 1950 Gray and 56 Fairchild tone arms were ubiquitous in radio stations across this country. Next we have 3 tone arms made of wood. The 1953 Weathers W2016. Being made from 1961 to 64, the Grado Laboratory, and the 1962 ADC-40, or Pritchard. England Scale Model Engineering, or SME, made the 3009 Series 2 for a decade, from 1963 to 73. 1980 saw the Oracle Prelude from our northern neighbor Canada. In 1984, New York's Grado came out with their signature. From New Jersey in 2014 came the first tone arm that is printed, the VPI JMW Classic 3D. And in 2019, this third design study from De Beer in Switzerland. Tackling other issues in vinyl playback, produced in 1980 to 81 out of California, is this Losi arm, which compensates for the stylus rake angle, thick or thin records. Then from Japan in 1984, the Dynavector DV507 bi-axis tone arms lowers the vertical effective mass, changing the resonant frequency depending on the cartridge from 8 to 13 Hz. All of these arms have been pivot variety, as if you held out your elbow, your forearm is the tone arm, and your hand holds the cartridge. But because disc cutting lathe rolls on miniature railroad tracks, cutting your spiral groove across the record in a straight line, certain manufacturers avoided lateral tracking error by creating tone arms that kept the cartridge perfectly tangent to the groove. James Warden of England was the first in 1960 by inventing a head shell that articulates. Van Epps of California in 1966 kept the cartridge tangent in the same way but suspended between 2 rods. In 1968, Maryland's Jacob Rabinow engineered a tone arm that would be drawn in a straight line across the record. The Rabco SL8 and 8E were progenitors of a dozen other companies. Here you have the Denison, the first air-bearing straight-line tracking tone arm from Massachusetts in 1979. We also remember the half-dozen turntables that are straight-line tracking. Examples here are the first, a Marantz SLT-12 from New York in 1967, and the beautiful Bang & Olufsen 4002 from Denmark in 1975. We are honored to display the cutting edge of 2019. From Lithuania, the Reed 5T articulating arm, where the back pivot comes out and keeps the entire tone arm tangent to the groove for the entire play of the record. And from England, the recipient of numerous grants in materials research, the Wilson Benish Graviton, before its introduction to the public. You saw it here first. If you've detected any errors in this program, we welcome you to simply let us know by email or postal letter. Thank you. To prove that audio reaches to the ends of the earth, this postcard captures explorer Ernest Shackleton, discoverer of the South Pole, playing his Victrola for a line of intrigued South Pole penguins. We would like to thank all the donors to the Playback exhibit, James Krajicek for his excellent photography, and Susie Hollander for her sound engineering and preparing this video. The Audio History Library and Museum is a not-for-profit educational charity registered in New York State. Donations of support by check may be sent to the Audio History Library and Museum, 217 East 70 Street, Box 1979, New York, New York, 10021, USA. Thank you for this time you've spent with us today. We look forward to seeing you next year when the Audio History Library and Museum will be bringing you rare and important history at the Audio Engineering Society and National Association of Broadcasters joint conventions at New York's Jacob Javits Convention Center, and the New York Audio Show at the Park Lane Hotel on Center Park South. See you there. And happy holidays to you and your families.